I'm Sarah, 28, and I thought I knew my family until the morning of my wedding rehearsal. Standing in my childhood kitchen, coffee mug trembling in my hands, I watched my mother calmly explain why my sister Emma showing up in a white wedding dress tomorrow was just her way of supporting you. The woman who raised me to believe family comes first had just chosen my manipulative sister over me on the most important day of my life. What happened next destroyed our family forever, but exposed truths that changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and revenge. Before I dive into this family drama that'll make you question everything about sibling rivalry, tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever dealt with family members who think your special day is about them, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you'll want to see how this wedding disaster turned into the sweetest revenge story ever told. Growing up, everyone always told me how lucky I was to have such a close-knit family. The Hendersons were the picture-perfect American dream on Maple Street in suburban Denver. Dad worked his way up from mailroom to regional manager at a logistics company. Mom volunteered at 3 different charities. And Emma and I were the Golden Girls. Honor roll students, varsity athletes, the works. But behind our white picket fence, things were never quite as rosy as they appeared. Emma, 2 years younger than me, had this uncanny ability to make every situation about herself. When I made valedictorian, she mysteriously came down with mono the day before graduation, requiring Mom's full attention. When I got my acceptance letter to Colorado State, Emma announced she was switching majors to communications, the same field I'd been passionate about since middle school. The pattern was so subtle, so perfectly executed that for years I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Mom would always say things like, "Sarah, you know, Emma looks up to you so much. She just wants to be like her big sister." Dad, exhausted from work and wanting peace, would simply nod along with whatever Mom decided. The real wake-up call came during my college years. I'd been dating Jake since sophomore year, a sweet engineering major who treated me like a queen. Emma was finishing high school then, and whenever Jake came home with me for holidays, she'd transform. Suddenly, the shy bookworm became this vivacious, flirty version of herself. She'd wear my clothes without asking, claiming they looked better on her anyway. She'd monopolize Jake's attention with dramatic stories about her high school adventures, always positioning herself as the funny, carefree sister, while I became the serious, uptight one. Jake noticed it too. "Your sisters. Intense," he'd say diplomatically. But I was so trained to make excuses for Emma's behavior that I'd brush it off. "She's just young," I'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." The first major crack in our family foundation happened during my junior year. I'd been working part-time at a local marketing firm, and my boss mentioned an internship opportunity that could lead to a full-time position after graduation. I was ecstatic. This was my dream job, exactly the kind of company I wanted to work for. I shared the news with my family during our weekly Sunday dinner. Emma listened intently as I described the position, asking detailed questions about the work environment, the company culture, even the specific building where they were located. I thought she was just being supportive. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the office for my interview, only to discover that Emma had somehow gotten herself an interview for the same position, scheduled 30 minutes before mine. When I confronted her later, she acted genuinely confused by my anger. "Sarah, I never said I wouldn't apply for jobs," she said, with those wide, innocent eyes that had gotten her out of trouble our entire lives. Besides, may the best candidate win, right? Mom's response was predictable. "Girls, there's no reason you can't both work in marketing. Denver's a big city." She refused to see the calculated nature of Emma's move, the way she'd pumped me for information only to use it against me. I got the internship barely, but the damage was done. For the first time, I started documenting Emma's behavior. I began noticing how she'd accidentally delete important messages from my phone when she borrowed it. How she'd give my friends the wrong time for parties, then show up herself looking perfectly put together while I arrived embarrassingly late. How she'd volunteer to help me with projects only to forget crucial details or misunderstand important instructions. The worst part wasn't Emma's manipulation, it was Mom's unwavering support of it. Every time I tried to address the pattern, Mom would accuse me of being jealous of not wanting Emma to succeed. "She's your baby sister, Sarah. You should be building her up, not tearing her down." The gaslighting was masterful. Mom had this way of making me feel guilty for even noticing Emma's behavior, let alone calling it out. "Emma just has such a kind heart," she'd say. "She doesn't think like you do, Sarah. She doesn't see life as a competition." But Emma absolutely saw life as a competition, one where she intended to win by any means necessary. By the time I graduated and started my career in earnest, I'd learned to share less trust carefully and keep my most important plans to myself. Jake and I moved in together, and I thought distance might help. For a while, it seemed to. Emma started college at a different school, and our interactions became limited to holidays and family gatherings. That's when I met David. Jake and I had drifted apart naturally. We wanted different things, different timelines, different futures. The breakup was amicable, sad, but necessary. 6 months later, at a friend's housewarming party, I met David Chen, a pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and the most beautiful laugh I'd ever heard. David was everything I hadn't known I was looking for. Where Jake had been content to drift through life, David was driven, passionate about his work, deeply committed to making the world better. He was also refreshingly direct. No games, no hidden agendas, just honest communication and genuine affection. When I brought David home for the first time, Emma was visiting from college. I watched nervously as she deployed her usual charm offensive, but something was different. David was polite but unimpressed by her performance. He kept his attention on me, asking about my work, my dreams, my thoughts on everything from city planning to travel destinations. Later that evening, I overheard Emma talking to Mom in the kitchen. "He's not really Sarah's type, is he?" she was saying. "I mean, he seems nice enough, but kind of boring. Sarah's always been attracted to more adventurous guys." It was such a small thing, but it crystallized everything I'd been feeling for years. Emma wasn't just competing with me, she was actively trying to undermine my happiness. And Mom, as always, was letting her. That night, David and I talked for hours about family dynamics, about loyalty and love, and the difference between the two. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart." It was the first time anyone had ever given me permission to acknowledge what I'd known in my gut for years. David proposed 18 months later on a hiking trail overlooking the Rocky Mountains, with a ring he'd designed himself and a speech that made me cry happy tears for 20 minutes straight. The moment was perfect. Just us, the mountains, and a future that finally felt like it belonged entirely to me. I should have known Emma wouldn't let me have it. The first sign of trouble came when I called my family to share the news. Mom's reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Screaming with joy, demanding to see photos, immediately launching into wedding planning mode. Dad was characteristically emotional, telling David over the phone that he'd better treat my girl right in that gruff, loving way that always made me feel protected. Emma's response was different. She congratulated me, of course, but there was something hollow in her voice. She asked to see the ring, examined it critically, then said, "It's so simple. I always pictured you with something more dramatic." It was a tiny comment barely worth noting, but it lodged in my brain like a splinter. David and I had chosen the design together, a classic solitaire that was elegant and timeless. I loved everything about it, but suddenly I found myself wondering if it was sophisticated enough, if people would think it was boring. The wedding planning process began innocently enough. Mom was in her element, researching venues and vendors, with the enthusiasm of someone planning her own dream wedding. Emma offered to help with various tasks, and initially, I was grateful for the support. She seemed genuinely excited about being my maid of honor, talking about how special it would be to stand beside me on the most important day of my life. But as the months progressed, a pattern emerged that felt disturbingly familiar. Emma would volunteer for specific responsibilities, then execute them in ways that subtly undermined my vision. When I asked her to research florists, she came back with options that were either wildly outside our budget or completely wrong for the aesthetic we'd discussed. When she offered to help address invitations, she insisted on using her own handwriting style because it was more artistic than mine. despite the fact that I'd specifically chosen calligraphy that matched our wedding theme. The dress shopping incident was the first major red flag. I'd planned a small, intimate appointment with Mom Emma and my best friend Jessica. We'd carefully selected a few boutiques that carried gowns in my style, preference, and price range. I was looking for something classic and romantic, nothing too elaborate or attention-grabbing. Emma arrived 20 minutes late to our first appointment, full of apologies about traffic. She immediately took charge of the situation, explaining to the consultant that I was very traditional and needed something safe and predictable. The way she said it made my preferences sound boring and unimaginative. Throughout the appointment, Emma had opinions about everything. The neckline was too conservative, the silhouette was too plain, the beading was too subtle. She kept pulling dresses that were completely wrong for me, but would have been stunning on her smaller frame and different coloring. "Sarah's always been afraid of standing out," she told the consultant with a laugh that sounded affectionate but felt like a knife. "I keep telling her this is her one day to be a princess, but she wants to blend into the background." The consultant, clearly influenced by Emma's confident commentary, started steering me toward gowns that felt completely foreign to my body and my style. I found myself trying on dress after dress that Emma loved, but that made me feel like I was playing dress-up in someone else's costume. When I finally found the dress, a stunning A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing train that made me feel like the best version of myself, Emma's response was telling. She was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she smiled brightly and said, "It's perfect for you, Sarah. Very appropriate. Appropriate. Not beautiful, not stunning, not perfect. Appropriate." Mom, however, was crying happy tears. "Oh, sweetheart, you look absolutely radiant. This is the one." Jessica was nodding enthusiastically, taking pictures from every angle. It was only Emma whose enthusiasm felt forced. The venue selection process revealed another layer of Emma's strategy. She'd volunteered to visit potential locations and create a spreadsheet comparing amenities and pricing. When she presented her findings, I noticed that several venues I'd been excited about had been marked as not available for our date, while options I'd never expressed interest in were highlighted as highly recommended. Something felt off, so I called one of the supposedly unavailable venues directly. Not only were they available for our wedding date, but they had no record of anyone named Emma Henderson ever contacting them. When I confronted Emma about the discrepancy, she looked genuinely confused. "Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I must have gotten my dates mixed up. You know how scattered I've been with school and everything." Her explanation was plausible, delivered with exactly the right amount of embarrassment and self-deprecation. But I was starting to recognize the pattern. The mistakes always favored Emma's preferences over mine. The miscommunications always seemed to benefit her somehow. The breaking point came during a family dinner 3 months before the wedding. David and I had just finalized our vendor contracts, and I was sharing updates about the timeline and logistics. Emma listened intently, asking detailed questions about everything from the photographer's schedule to the reception timeline. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about what to wear as your maid of honor. I know you said you wanted everyone in dusty blue, but I found this amazing dress that would photograph so much better against your color scheme." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a flowing floor-length gown in the most beautiful cream color I'd ever seen. It was undeniably gorgeous, and it would indeed complement our wedding palette perfectly. It was also unmistakably white. "Emma," I said carefully, "that's a white dress." "Oh no, it's cream," she corrected quickly. "Totally different. And anyway, it's not like pure white, so it's not really breaking any rules." "Mom, don't you think it would be stunning in the photos?" Mom studied the image thoughtfully. "It is beautiful, Emma. And you're right, it's not technically white." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. "Emma, I'd really prefer if you wore the dusty blue like we discussed. All the other bridesmaids will be wearing it, and I want the photos to look cohesive." Emma's face fell in that practiced way that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. "Of course, Sarah. I just thought. I want to look good standing next to you, you know, but if you think I'll look bad in the blue, I understand." The manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly executed. Suddenly, I was the unreasonable sister who didn't want her maid of honor to look beautiful. Mom was giving me that look, the one that said I was being difficult and unsupportive. We'll find you a beautiful dusty blue dress, I said firmly. That's what we agreed on. Emma nodded with that martyred expression she'd perfected over the years. Whatever makes you happy, Sarah, it's your day. But I knew this wasn't over. Emma never gave up that easily. The week before my wedding, I should have been floating on cloud nine. Instead, I felt like I was walking through a minefield, constantly braced for the next explosion. Emma had been on her best behavior since the dress incident, helping with last-minute details and making all the right supportive sister noises. But I knew her too well by now to trust the performance. The rehearsal dinner went off without a hitch. Emma looked stunning in her dusty blue bridesmaid dress, played her role perfectly, and gave a maid of honor speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She talked about growing up with me, about how proud she was to call me her sister, about how perfect David was for me. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed every word. That night I stayed at my childhood home while David went back to our apartment, keeping with tradition about not seeing each other before the wedding. I fell asleep feeling cautiously optimistic that maybe, just maybe, Emma had finally decided to let me have this one perfect day. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly. Text after text was coming in from my bridesmaids, my cousins, and David's sister. The messages were confused, concerned, and increasingly frantic. Sarah, Emma just posted something really weird on Instagram. Is everything okay? Emma's story is concerning. Call me as soon as possible. Emma's post is making people think something happened to you. With shaking hands, I opened Instagram and navigated to Emma's story. What I saw made my blood run cold. She'd posted a series of photos from the rehearsal dinner, with captions that told a completely different story than what had actually happened. In one photo of me looking slightly tired, she'd written, "Poor Sarah is so stressed about tomorrow. I wish I could help her feel more confident about her choices." Another photo showed David and his groomsmen laughing with the caption, "The boys seem to be having fun. Hope everyone still feels the same way tomorrow." But the worst was a photo of herself looking radiant in her bridesmaid dress, captioned, "Sometimes being the supportive sister means staying quiet about your concerns. Here's to hoping everything works out." Each post was carefully crafted to sound supportive while actually planting seeds of doubt and drama. She'd made it sound like there were serious problems with my relationship, like people close to us had reservations about the wedding, like she knew something terrible that she was nobly keeping to herself. I screenshot everything and stormed downstairs to find Emma in the kitchen calmly eating cereal and scrolling through her phone. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, shoving my phone in her face. Emma looked at the screenshots with practiced innocence. "What do you mean? I was just sharing some moments from last night. You made it sound like my wedding is some kind of disaster waiting to happen, Sarah. I think you're overreacting." I was being supportive. That word, overreacting. The same word Mom had been using to dismiss my concerns about Emma for years. Supportive. You basically told everyone that my fiancé and I are making a mistake. Emma sighed heavily like she was dealing with an unreasonable child. "I can see how you might interpret it that way, but that's not what I meant at all. I was just documenting the emotions of the weekend. Delete them. Right now." "I already did," Emma said quickly. "As soon as I realized you were upset, I took them down." "God, Sarah, I was trying to help by sharing how beautiful everything was. But the damage was done." I'd spent the morning fielding calls and texts from concerned family and friends. David's mother had called him in a panic, wondering if she'd missed some major relationship drama. My grandmother had left 3 voicemails asking if I needed to talk about anything before the ceremony. When Mom came down for breakfast and found me in tears at the kitchen table, her immediate response was to ask what I'd done to upset Emma. "Mom, she sabotaged my wedding morning with those posts." Sarah, Emma explained everything to me. She took them down as soon as she realized they might be misunderstood. She feels terrible about the miscommunication. Miscommunication. She knew exactly what she was doing. Mom sat down across from me wearing that patient expression she always used when she thought I was being dramatic. "Honey, I know wedding stress can make everything feel amplified, but Emma has been nothing but supportive throughout this entire process. Maybe you're reading too much into innocent social media posts. Mom, this isn't about wedding stress. This is about Emma systematically trying to undermine my happiness and you enabling her every single time. That's enough. Mom's voice was sharp now. Emma is your maid of honor. She's standing up there with you today because she loves you. I won't have you attacking her on your wedding morning over a misunderstanding. That's when Emma reappeared in the doorway. And what I saw made my heart stop. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. It was floor-length flowing and absolutely stunning. It was also white. Not cream, not ivory, not off-white. Pure wedding dress white. Emma, I said slowly, what are you wearing? Oh, this old thing. She did a little twirl, the white fabric swirling around her like something out of a fairy tale. I found it in my closet and realized it would photograph so much better than the dusty blue. Mom said you wouldn't mind since it's your special day and you want everyone to look their best. I turned to Mom, who was carefully avoiding my eyes. You told her she could wear white to my wedding, Sarah. It's just a dress. Emma wants to look nice for your photos. It's not just a dress and you know it. No one wears white to someone else's wedding. Emma's eyes filled with crocodile tears. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I honestly didn't think it would be a big deal. If it bothers you that much, I can go change, but all my other dresses are back at my apartment and we don't really have time. She was lying. I knew she was lying. She'd planned this perfectly. Bringing the white dress, getting Mom's permission, timing the reveal for when it would be impossible to fix without causing major delays. You did this on purpose, I said quietly. That's a horrible thing to say, Emma whispered, tears now falling freely. I would never deliberately try to hurt you on your wedding day. But that's exactly what she was doing and we all knew it. Mom stood up abruptly. Sarah, you need to get ready. Your hair and makeup team will be here soon, and you're getting yourself worked up over nothing. Emma looks beautiful, you'll look beautiful, and this will all seem silly once you're walking down that aisle. Mom, please. Can't you see what she's doing? What I see is a bride who's so stressed that she's attacking her sister for wanting to look nice. Emma has been nothing but helpful, and you're treating her like she's your enemy. Standing there in my childhood kitchen, still in my pajamas, looking at my sister in her white dress, and my mother's willfully blind support of her manipulation, something inside me finally broke. But instead of shattering, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. For the first time in my life, I saw the situation exactly as it was, without the fog of family loyalty or the desperate hope that things might somehow change. This is the moment when everything shifted, not just for my wedding day, but for my understanding of who I was dealing with and what I was willing to tolerate. Sometimes, the biggest revelations come not from dramatic confrontations, but from quiet moments of absolute clarity, when you finally stop making excuses for people who don't deserve them. What happened next would change not just my wedding day, but my entire relationship with my family forever. I stood in that kitchen for exactly 30 seconds, watching my mother fuss over Emma's white dress like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then I made a decision that would change everything. You know what? You're absolutely right, Mom. Emma should wear whatever makes her feel beautiful. Both of them looked surprised by my sudden change in tone. Emma's tears stopped mid-flow, and Mom's shoulders relaxed with visible relief. I'm going to get ready now. I continued calmly. Emma, you look stunning. Thank you for being such a supportive sister. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom where my wedding dress hung like a promise of the future. But instead of putting it on, I called David. Babe, I know we're not supposed to talk today, but I need you to do something for me without asking questions. Can you trust me? Always, he said without hesitation. What do you need? I need you to ask your cousin Mike to start recording everything from the moment guests arrive. Tell him to be discreet, but thorough. And honey, today is going to be very different than we planned, but I promise you it's going to be perfect. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of hair, makeup, and careful performance. I smiled when the photographer arrived. I laughed with my bridesmaids. I hugged Emma and told her how beautiful she looked in her white dress, making sure the photographer captured every moment. Emma was glowing. She'd gotten away with it again, and she knew it. She posed for photo after photo, the white dress catching the light perfectly, making her look like an ethereal goddess. She was the picture of innocent beauty, and everyone was commenting on how stunning the maid of honor looked. What Emma didn't know was that I'd spent the morning making phone calls of my own. The first call was to my college roommate Lisa, who worked in digital marketing and had maintained Emma's social media presence during a summer internship 2 years ago. Lisa, I need those screenshots you took of Emma's deleted posts from your work portfolio. The ones where she was pretending to be me to get discounts from vendors. The second call was to Jake, my ex-boyfriend. Jake, remember how you said Emma made you uncomfortable? I need you to tell me exactly what she said to you the night before our breakup. The third call was to my cousin Rachel, who had been Emma's college roommate for 1 semester before requesting a transfer. Rachel, you said you'd tell me someday why you moved out. Today's that day. By the time I was walking down the aisle, I had a complete picture of who my sister really was. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Emma stood beside me in her white dress, playing the perfect maid of honor role. She held my bouquet during the ring exchange, dabbed her eyes with tissues during the vows, and beamed at the photographer throughout the entire service. But I could see the way guests were whispering to each other. I could see the confused looks, the raised eyebrows, the uncomfortable glances at Emma's dress choice. She was so focused on her moment in the spotlight that she didn't notice she was making herself the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. During the cocktail hour, I watched Emma work the room, accepting compliments on her bold fashion choice and deflecting criticism with her practiced innocent act. "Oh, I just wanted Sarah to have the most beautiful photos possible," she kept saying. "I would do anything for my sister." That's when I made my entrance to the reception. I'd changed out of my wedding dress into something I'd kept hidden until this moment. A second dress that David and I had secretly purchased for exactly this scenario. It was a stunning champagne-colored gown that made me look like I was glowing from within. But more importantly, I was carrying a microphone and a laptop. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the reception space. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredible day with David and me. Before we begin the party, I wanted to share something special with all of you." Emma's face went pale. She was standing near the head table, still posing in her white dress, but something in my tone had clearly set off alarm bells. "My sister Emma gave such a beautiful speech at the rehearsal dinner about sisterly love and support. But I thought you might be interested in seeing what real family support looks like behind the scenes." I opened the laptop and connected it to the reception's AV system. The first slide that appeared was a screenshot of Emma's Instagram story from that morning, the one she thought she'd successfully deleted. A murmur went through the crowd as people read her passive-aggressive posts about my wedding. But I was just getting started. For those of you wondering about Emma's dress choice today, I continued, my voice steady and clear. She and I had several conversations about the wedding party attire. Here's a text thread from last month. Up on the screen came screenshots of our messages where Emma had explicitly agreed to wear dusty blue, and had even sent me photos of potential dresses in that exact color. And for those curious about Emma's creative interpretation of social media support, I said, advancing to the next slide, here are some posts from her fake Instagram account where she's been impersonating me to get vendor discounts and spreading rumors about my relationship. The evidence was damning. Screenshots of Emma posing as me, claiming David and I were having financial problems, and asking for sympathy discounts. Posts where she'd implied I was a bridezilla who was impossible to work with. Messages where she'd contacted my vendors to suggest improvements to our contracts that would benefit her instead of us. Emma was frozen in place, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. Mom was staring at the screen in shocked silence. But I still wasn't done. "Jake, my ex-boyfriend, is here tonight. Jake, would you mind sharing what Emma told you the night before we broke up?" Jake stood up slowly, clearly uncomfortable but determined to tell the truth. "Emma called me and said Sarah had been cheating on me with a guy from her work-study program. She said she didn't want to be the one to tell me, but she couldn't watch me get played. She had fake screenshots and everything." The room was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. "The thing is," I continued, "I never had a work-study program. And the screenshots Emma showed Jake were from a stock photo website. Something my digital marketing friend Lisa discovered when Emma tried to use the same fake conversation templates for other schemes." Emma finally found her voice. Sarah, please, you're misunderstanding everything. I can explain. Oh, you'll get your chance to explain, I said with a smile. But first, let's hear from my cousin Rachel about your semester as college roommates. Rachel stood up from her table near the back, her face grim but resolute. I'd asked her to be prepared for this moment, and she'd agreed it was time for the truth to come out. Emma was my roommate for exactly 4 months, Rachel began, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. I moved out after I caught her stealing my identity to apply for scholarships that I was eligible for. She'd been intercepting my mail, copying my transcripts, and submitting applications using my academic achievements as her own. Emma's face had gone from pale to ashen. Rachel, that's not. That's not what happened. She also, Rachel continued, ignoring Emma's protests, created fake social media accounts, impersonating 3 different girls in our dorm. She was catfishing guys from other schools, getting them to send money and gifts by pretending to be us. When I reported it to housing, they found evidence that she'd been doing it to at least 6 other girls. The murmurs from our wedding guests were growing louder. I could see people turning to their neighbors, connecting dots, remembering their own strange interactions with Emma over the years. My college friend Jessica stood up next. I've been wanting to say this for years, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Emma, you told everyone at Sarah's graduation party that she'd been accepted to graduate school with a full scholarship. But then you cornered me later and said Sarah had made the whole thing up, that she was actually failing most of her classes and was too embarrassed to tell anyone. That's ridiculous, Emma protested, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. The problem, Jessica continued, was that you told half the party one story and half the party another story. You were playing both sides, trying to make yourself look like the truthful sister, and Sarah look like either a failure or a liar, depending on which narrative served you better in the moment. More people were standing up now. David's sister Claire walked to the front of the room, her expression furious. Emma, you called me 2 weeks ago and told me that Sarah was having serious doubts about marrying David. You said she'd confided in you that she thought David was too serious, too boring, that she was only going through with the wedding because she was afraid of disappointing everyone. David's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. His face was a mixture of shock and growing anger as the full scope of Emma's manipulation became clear. You asked me to talk to David. Claire continued to feel him out about whether he'd noticed any distance from Sarah. You said you were worried about him getting hurt. I spent the last 2 weeks convinced that my brother was about to marry someone who didn't really want him. Emma was backing away from the center of the room now, the white dress that had seemed so triumphant this morning, now looking like a spotlight, exposing her for exactly what she was. But I still had one more revelation to share. Mom, I said, turning to face my mother who was sitting at the family table with tears streaming down her face. I have a question for you. Did you or did you not give Emma permission to wear white to my wedding? Mom's silence stretched for what felt like hours. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. She told me you'd said it was okay. She said you'd decided you wanted all the women in the wedding party to wear whatever made them feel most beautiful. And you believed her. She showed me a text from you. I saw it with my own eyes. I walked over to Mom's table and knelt beside her chair, my voice gentle but firm. Mom, Emma has been manipulating both of us for years. She's gotten so good at it that she can fake text messages, create entire conversations that never happened. She's been playing us against each other, making me look like the jealous, controlling sister and making herself look like the victim. I stood up and addressed the entire room again. The reason I'm doing this now in front of all of you is because Emma's manipulation has thrived in private. She says one thing to one person, something different to another, and counts on all of us being too polite or too confused to compare notes. Well, today we're all comparing notes. Emma finally found her voice, but it was shrill and desperate now. This is insane, Sarah. You're having some kind of breakdown. She's been under so much stress planning this wedding. And I think she's just Emma, I interrupted calmly. Jake, can you play that recording I asked you to make? Jake pulled out his phone with a grim expression. Emma called me 3 days ago. She didn't know I was recording, but honestly, after what she'd put me and Sarah through, I wanted evidence if she tried to manipulate me again. He pressed play and Emma's voice filled the reception hall through the speakers. "Jake, I'm really worried about Sarah. I think she's making a huge mistake with this David guy. She's been saying things, questioning whether he's really right for her. I know it's not my place, but I wondered if you might want to reach out to her. You two had something really special and I hate seeing her settle for someone who doesn't understand her the way you did." The recording continued with Emma suggesting that Jake should accidentally run into me during my bachelorette party, that maybe if I saw him again, I'd realize what I was giving up. The room was completely silent now, except for the sound of Emma's voice on the recording, weaving lies and manipulation with the skill of a master craftsperson. When the recording ended, Emma was standing alone in the center of the dance floor, her white dress now looking like a costume from a play where she was the only one who didn't know she was the villain. "Emma," I said, "finally, you have been systematically sabotaging my relationships, my opportunities, and my happiness for years. You've manipulated our mother into enabling your behavior by making me look like the problem every time I tried to set boundaries. You've gaslit me into thinking I was paranoid and jealous when I was actually just responding to your deliberate cruelty." Tears were running down Emma's face now, but they looked different from her usual performance tears. These looked real and desperate and absolutely terrified. "But here's the thing," I continued, "I don't want revenge. I want something much more powerful than that. I want the truth. And now, everyone knows it." The silence that followed my last words felt like the entire universe holding its breath. Then slowly people began to stand. Not to leave, but to approach me with stories I'd never heard, apologies I'd never expected, and support I'd always needed but never received. My grandmother was the first to reach me, her eyes blazing with an anger I'd rarely seen from such a gentle woman. "Sarah, honey, I owe you the biggest apology. Emma told me you'd asked her not to visit me in the hospital last year because you were worried I'd leave her something in my will. I've been so hurt thinking you were trying to keep us apart." Uncle Mike was next. "She told me you'd said I couldn't walk you down the aisle because you were embarrassed about my prosthetic leg. I was devastated, kiddo. I had no idea she was lying." One by one the stories poured out. Emma had spent years creating elaborate lies that painted me as selfish, manipulative, and cruel. The exact things she was doing herself. She'd isolated me from extended family, sabotaged my friendships, and poisoned my relationships by projecting her own behavior onto me. David's family surrounded us, offering their own revelations. Emma had contacted several of them over the months leading up to the wedding, planting seeds of doubt about my character, my commitment, even my mental health. She'd told David's mother I had a drinking problem. She'd told his sister I was only marrying him for financial security. She'd told his best man I'd been asking inappropriate questions about David's ex-girlfriends. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came from my own father. Dad rarely spoke up during family conflicts, preferring to let Mom handle emotional situations. But as the evidence mounted, something in his expression shifted from confusion to recognition to deep, burning anger. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the room despite its low volume. 3 years ago you told me Sarah had been stealing money from the family vacation fund to pay for her apartment deposit." Emma's face went white. "Dad, you showed me bank statements that you said Sarah had hidden from us. You cried and said you didn't want to get her in trouble, but you were worried about her making poor choices with money." Dad's voice was getting stronger now, years of suppressed doubts finally finding their voice. I confronted Sarah about it. She was so confused, so hurt, that I would accuse her of stealing from the family. She cried for hours, Dad. She couldn't understand why I didn't trust her. He turned to face me, tears in his eyes. I made her prove she hadn't taken the money. I made her show me bank statements, explain every expense account for every dollar. I treated my eldest daughter like a criminal because my youngest daughter is a liar. The weight of Dad's words hit Emma like a physical blow. She staggered backward, looking around the room desperately for any sign of support or sympathy. But there was none left to give. Mom was sobbing openly now, her hands covering her face. "What have I done?" she whispered. "What have I let happen to my family?" But I wasn't interested in watching Emma suffer. I was interested in moving forward. Emma, I said, my voice steady and clear, you have a choice to make right now. You can continue denying everything, continue playing the victim, and lose what's left of your relationship with this family forever. Or you can own what you've done, get the help you clearly need, and maybe, someday, we can find a way to rebuild something honest between us. She'd been intercepting my mail, copying my transcripts, and submitting applications using my academic achievements as her own. Emma's face had gone from pale to ashen. Rachel, you know that's not what happened. She also, Rachel, continued ignoring Emma's protests, created fake social media accounts, impersonating 3 different girls in our dorm. She was catfishing guys from other schools, getting them to send money and gifts by pretending to be us. I've just been dealing with your sabotage for so long that I learned to work twice as hard for everything I wanted. The difference between us isn't luck or talent, it's that I've been building while you've been tearing down. I walked over to where she stood and, despite everything, took her hands in mine. But here's what I know about you that you seem to have forgotten: you're brilliant. You're creative. You're capable of amazing things when you're not wasting all your energy trying to destroy what I've built. You could have been my greatest ally instead of my biggest obstacle. Emma was crying openly now, the white dress she'd worn to upstage me now wrinkled and stained with tears. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix this, I said gently. You can't undo years of damage with an apology. But you can choose to stop doing damage now. You can choose to get help. You can choose to become the person you're capable of being instead of the person you've been. I turned back to our wedding guests, David's hand warm and steady in mine. Thank you all for witnessing this today. I know it wasn't the celebration you expected, but it was exactly what David and I needed. We're starting our marriage with truth, with clarity, and with the support of people who genuinely love us. The rest of the evening was unlike any wedding reception in history. Instead of dancing and cake cutting, we had healing conversations. Instead of posed photos, we had honest tears and real embraces. Family members apologized to each other for years of misunderstandings. Friends shared stories they'd been afraid to tell. David and I renewed our vows again, this time with complete honesty about who we were and what we'd overcome to find each other. Emma left early, driven home by Mom, who finally understood the full scope of what had been happening in our family. Dad stayed, helping to clean up, and telling anyone who would listen how proud he was of my strength and my grace under impossible circumstances. 6 months later, Emma started therapy. She's been working with a counselor who specializes in personality disorders and family trauma. She sends me a letter once a month, not asking for forgiveness but sharing what she's learning about herself and the damage she's caused. I don't respond to the letters yet. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday we'll rebuild something real between us. But right now I'm focused on the family I've chosen and the life I've built with David. Looking back, I realize that Emma's white dress at my wedding was the most perfect gift she could have given me. It forced everything into the light. It gave me the courage to stop protecting her from the consequences of her actions. It showed me exactly who had my back and who didn't. And most importantly, it taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free. Have any of you dealt with family members who seemed determined to sabotage your happiness? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences is the most healing thing of all. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, because I'll be sharing more stories about standing up for yourself, setting boundaries with toxic family members, and finding the strength to choose your own happiness over keeping the peace. Thank you for being here for my story, and remember, you deserve people in your life who celebrate your joy instead of trying to steal it. Your happiness matters, your boundaries matter, and you're worth fighting for. Until next time, keep choosing yourself, keep speaking your truth, and keep believing that you deserve better than the treatment you might have been taught to accept.